Imagine coming home one evening to find that everything you thought you knew about your life was a lie. Imagine the person you loved most in the world tearing apart everything you believed in, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal. This is my story, a story of love, heartbreak, and survival. It's the story of how everything I thought I knew was shattered in a single night, and how I was forced to rebuild from the ashes. I spent the entire day cleaning the house and ironing Matthew's shirts. I had it all planned. After lunch, I started preparing his favorite dish, chicken cordon bleu stuffed with cheese and ham. I knew every step by heart, every seasoning, every technique, and it all had to be perfect. For dessert, I made his beloved raspberry cheesecake, and it came out beautifully. I had done it all just to make him smile, to show him how much he meant to me. You'd never catch me at home looking anything less than my best. I was always put together, always made up, always dressed in something that would make him look twice. I didn't do it out of vanity. I did it because I loved him. I wanted to keep him happy, to keep him focused on the positive things in our lives, to make sure he didn't ever feel the need to look at another woman. After showering, I sat in front of the mirror, styling my hair and applying a touch of makeup. I slipped into a fitted dress, a soft blue that he always said brought out my eyes. I thought maybe if I looked fresh and inviting, it might ease some of the tension that had been building between us recently. I had noticed he'd been a little more distant, a little more irritable, snapping over small things. But I told myself it was just the stress from work, that it was normal, that everyone goes through these phases. And so I waited, glancing at the clock every few minutes, my heart beating with that familiar excitement that came whenever I knew he'd be home soon. At exactly 7 p.m., I heard the sound of his car pulling into the driveway. My heart leaped, and I rushed to the door to greet him, smiling, feeling like a young bride all over again. But the moment he walked in, I felt something was wrong. His eyes were dark, his expression hard, and he barely looked at me. He tossed his briefcase carelessly on the floor, his movements stiff, his posture closed. He walked past me without a word and headed straight for the dining room. I followed him, feeling a pang of worry in my chest, but I kept my smile on, telling myself it was just a bad day. "Welcome home, Matthew," I said warmly. "I made your favorite dinner tonight, chicken cordon bleu and raspberry cheesecake for dessert. I thought maybe we could have a little celebration, just the two of us." But Matthew barely glanced at me. His gaze was distant, his mouth set in a grim line. He sat down, looking at the table as if it was an inconvenience rather than the carefully prepared feast I had made just for him. "Celebrate what, exactly?" he muttered under his breath, his voice laced with irritation. My heart sank, but I forced a smile, determined to stay cheerful. "Just a little something, to lift our spirits. You've been working so hard, and I thought you might like a break. Just us, no stress, no worries." But Matthew's response was far from what I'd expected. He scoffed, his voice low and bitter. "A break? Do you have any idea what's going on with my work? Sales are down, profits are slipping, and you want to celebrate?" He shook his head, barely looking at me. "What's the point of all this?" I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't how I had pictured the evening. I had imagined laughter, maybe some quiet moments together, a chance to reconnect. But all I saw now was resentment and anger in his eyes. I tried to reach out, placing a hand on his. "Matthew, I'm here for you. Whatever you're going through, we'll face it together. I just want to understand, to support you in any way I can." But he pulled his hand away as if my touch burned him, his face hardening further. "Support me," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What could you possibly understand about running a business? Do you think it's easy? Or do you just like to meddle in things you know nothing about?" I felt a lump forming in my throat, but I swallowed it down, refusing to let him see how much his words hurt. "I'm not meddling, Matthew," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to help. You've been so distant lately, and I just wanted to be there for you, that's all." He looked at me then, his gaze cold and calculating, as if he was seeing me for the first time, and didn't like what he saw. "You think you're helping," he said with a sneer. "Do you think I need your help? Do you think I need anything from you?" His words sliced through me like a knife. I had given him everything, my time, my love, my life. I had built my world around him, done everything I could to make him happy, to be the wife he needed. And now he was looking at me with nothing but contempt. A heavy silence settled over us, thick and suffocating. I took a deep breath, steeling myself as I prepared to ask the question that had been haunting me for weeks. "Matthew," I began, my voice trembling, "is there someone else?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, a momentary hesitation. But it was quickly replaced by something colder, harder. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he looked at me with a mixture of disdain and amusement. "Yes," he said flatly. "There is someone else. Someone who actually understands me, who doesn't cling to me like a parasite." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs, the ground slip out from under me. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what he had just said. You're serious?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. He smirked, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Oh, I'm more than serious. I'm done with this charade, with this pathetic excuse for a marriage. You're nothing but a burden to me. You can't even give me children. You're barren, useless. What do I need you for?" I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces, each word cutting deeper than the last. I stared at him, tears streaming down my face, unable to comprehend the cruelty in his words. How could he say such things? How could he be so heartless? Desperately, I reached out to him, my hands shaking. "Matthew, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling, we can try to rebuild." But he laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made me feel small and worthless. "Rebuild," he sneered. "There's nothing left to rebuild, Lexi. I've wasted enough years of my life on you. I want a divorce. I want you out of my life." I felt my knees give way, and I sank down into the chair, my mind reeling. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just days ago, I had believed we were happy, that we were a team. And now he was telling me I was nothing to him, that he wanted me gone. He stood up, not even sparing me a second glance as he walked out of the room. I sat there, numb, staring at the remnants of the dinner I had so lovingly prepared, now cold and untouched. The life I had built, the love I had given so freely, had been discarded like yesterday's trash. I didn't know where to go, who to turn to. I felt as if my world had crumbled beneath my feet, leaving me stranded and alone. For the first time in years, I had no idea what my future held, no idea who I was without him. With a heavy heart, I packed a small suitcase, filling it with only the essentials. I didn't take much, just a few clothes, some personal items. I didn't even bother with the jewelry he had given me over the years. It all felt tainted now, a reminder of the love I had thought was real, but had turned out to be nothing more than a lie. That night, I found myself in a cheap hotel room, lying on a hard mattress, staring at the ceiling as my mind replayed every word he had said. I felt hollow, as if a part of me had been ripped away, leaving only emptiness behind. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice echoing in my mind. I had loved him so deeply, so completely, and he had thrown it all away. The next morning, I woke up feeling more alone than ever. My suitcase sat by the foot of the bed, a silent testament to the life I had left behind. I called my parents, hoping they could offer some comfort, some guidance. They listened patiently, their voices gentle and soothing. "We're here for you, Lexi," my mother said. "Whatever you need, we're here." Their words were a balm to my wounded heart, but I couldn't shake the feeling of despair that clung to me like a shadow. I packed up my things and made my way to the car, not sure where I was going, just needing to be away from everything. A few days later, I found myself at Matthew's workplace, the clothing factory that had been the center of our lives. I hadn't been to this place in years, but now, faced with the reality of our divorce, it felt like the only place left to go. I stood outside, taking in the sight of the factory, a stark contrast to the warm, inviting home I had created for us. Inside, workers moved about, busy with their tasks, unaware of the personal turmoil unfolding right outside their doors. I decided to confront him, to find some answers, some closure. I walked through the doors, the familiar smell of fabric and machinery filling my senses. Matthew was there, standing by his desk, surrounded by papers and reports. He looked up, his expression one of annoyance as he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice cold. "I needed to talk to you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We need to discuss the divorce, the settlement, everything." He scoffed, turning back to his work. "I don't have time for this, Lexi. I have things to manage." But I wasn't going to leave without answers. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "Matthew, I need to understand why you did this. Why you decided to end everything we built together." He finally looked at me, his eyes hard and unyielding. "Because I need to move on, Lexi. I need to start a new chapter in my life, one that doesn't include you dragging me down with your constant need for approval and your inability to understand the pressures I face." His words were like daggers, each one piercing through the remnants of my heart. I felt tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Is this really about work? About the factory? Or is there something else, something you're not telling me? He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, Lexi, this isn't easy for me either. But I've made up my mind. I need to focus on rebuilding my business, and I can't do that with you constantly worrying about everything. It's not healthy." I felt a mixture of anger and sadness bubbling up inside me. "So, it's all about the business. You just want to cast me aside like I never mattered." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "It's not like that. You mattered to me once. But things have changed. People change." I stood there, feeling the weight of his words crashing down on me. "People change," I echoed, my voice breaking. "Yes, they do. But love is supposed to stay strong through the changes. Isn't that what marriage is about?" He shook his head, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes, love just isn't enough. We can't force things to work when they're clearly not. I need to think about my future, Lexi, and I can't do that while being tied down by a marriage that's holding me back." I felt like I was being punched in the stomach, each word making it harder to breathe. I opened my mouth to respond, to plead, to beg him to reconsider, but nothing came out. Instead, I turned and walked out of the factory, the doors closing behind me with a finality that echoed the end of our marriage. Back in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling utterly defeated. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had fallen apart. One moment, I was preparing a perfect dinner, hoping to mend the cracks in our relationship. The next, I was alone, betrayed by the man I had loved for so long. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself struggling to piece together the fragments of my life. I tried to move forward, to find a new purpose, but the pain was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't find the motivation to do the things I once loved. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of sorrow and confusion. In my desperation, I reached out to my closest friend, Andrea. She had always been there for me, a constant in the ever-changing landscape of my life. "Andrea," I said one evening, my voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what to do. Matthew has left me, taken everything. I'm so alone." Andrea listened patiently, her eyes filled with concern and sympathy. "Lexi, I'm so sorry you're going through this. You're not alone. I'm here for you, and I'll help you get through this." Her words were a small comfort in the midst of my turmoil. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She was more distant, more reserved, and less available than usual. Whenever I brought up my struggles, she would respond with vague reassurances, never offering concrete help. It was as if she were hiding something, and my instincts told me that something was terribly wrong. One evening, as I sat in our favorite cafe, watching the world go by outside the window, Andrea arrived, her expression unreadable. She sat down across from me, her eyes darting around the room as if she was searching for something, or someone. "Lexi," she began, her voice tight, "we need to talk." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What is it, Andrea? You seem upset." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "It's about Matthew. There are things you need to know, things that could change everything." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you mean? What have you found out?" Andrea hesitated, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment before she looked away. "I can't say here. It's not safe. Meet me tonight at the old bridge by the river. Come alone." I felt a surge of fear and curiosity. The old bridge was a place we had used to frequent in our youth, a place filled with memories both good and bad. "Are you sure? This sounds serious." She nodded, her face etched with worry. "I'm serious, Lexi. Please, you need to hear this." That night, under the cover of darkness, I made my way to the bridge, my mind racing with questions and fears. The river flowed silently beneath me, the city lights reflecting off the water's surface like a million tiny stars. I saw Andrea waiting for me, her figure barely visible in the dim light. "What's going on, Andrea?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her eyes filled with pain. "I've been doing some digging, Lexi. About Matthew and his business dealings. There's more to this divorce than you realize." I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. "What do you mean? What's he involved in?" Andrea looked around nervously before leaning in closer. "Matthew isn't just struggling with his business. He's been involved in some shady deals, unethical practices. He's been skimming money, laundering funds, and now he's trying to cover it up by pushing you out of the picture. The divorce, it's not just about ending the marriage. It's about getting rid of you so he can save face and hide his crimes." My mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of Andrea's words. "Are you saying Matthew is committing fraud? Why would he do that?" She nodded, her expression grave. "He's in deep, Lexi. He borrowed more money than he could repay, invested in risky ventures, and now things are spiraling out of control. He needs to get away from everything, and getting you out of the way is part of his plan." I felt a surge of fear and anger. "Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you say anything earlier?" Andrea sighed, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I wanted to believe the best about him, to think that our friendship meant more than any of this. But the evidence is overwhelming. I couldn't stay silent knowing you were being manipulated and betrayed not just by your husband, but by the person you trusted most. Tears welled up in my eyes as I tried to process everything. What can I do, Andrea? How do I protect myself from him? She reached out, taking my hand in hers. First, you need to gather evidence. Documents, financial records, anything that can prove his wrongdoing. And you need a lawyer who can handle this kind of case. Someone who isn't connected to Matthew and can fight for your rights without bias. I felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair. But where do I find such a lawyer? Matthew has his connections, his influence. Andrea squeezed my hand reassuringly. I know someone. Janet. She's a brilliant lawyer, not very well known, but she has a reputation for taking on tough cases. I'll introduce you to her. Relief washed over me, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. Thank you, Andrea. I don't know what I'd do without you. She smiled softly, her eyes filled with unwavering support. You don't have to do this alone, Lexi. I'm here for you every step of the way. Over the next few days, Andrea kept her promise. She arranged a meeting with Janet, who listened attentively as I recounted my ordeal. Janet was compassionate, yet sharp, quickly understanding the complexities of my situation. She assured me that we could fight back, that I deserved justice and the chance to rebuild my life without Matthew's shadow looming over me. As we delved deeper into Matthew's financial dealings, we uncovered a tangled web of deceit and corruption. Late-night meetings, secret transactions, and a trail of evidence that painted a picture of a man I had once loved, now revealed as someone who would stop at nothing to protect his interests. The more we discovered, the more determined I became to see this through, to reclaim my life and expose the truth. But with each step forward, the danger grew. Matthew was a powerful man, with connections that reached far beyond the factory walls. Threats began to surface, anonymous calls warning me to back off, subtle acts of intimidation that made it clear he wasn't going to let me take him down easily. One evening, as I was leaving Janet's office, I noticed a black car following me. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, trying to lose the car in the maze of city streets. But it was no use. The car remained a constant presence, a silent predator lurking in the shadows. I felt a chill of fear run down my spine, realizing just how far Matthew would go to protect his secrets. Back at the hotel, I sat alone, staring out the window at the city lights. The weight of everything pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I thought about Andrea, about Janet, and the small group of friends who had stood by me in my darkest moments. Their support was unwavering, but the road ahead seemed long and fraught with peril. One night, as I was poring over financial reports and legal documents, my phone rang. It was Janet. Lexi, we need to talk. It's urgent. I felt a surge of anxiety as I answered. What's wrong, Janet? There's been a development, she said, her voice tense. We've uncovered evidence that links Matthew directly to the money laundering scheme. It's solid, but we need to act quickly before he catches on. I want you to meet me at the office tomorrow morning. We need to finalize our strategy. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I'll be there. The next morning, I arrived at Janet's office, feeling a mix of determination and fear. She was already there, her face serious, as she laid out the evidence we had gathered. Photographs, bank statements, and witness testimonies, all pointing to Matthew's illicit activities. It was overwhelming, yet empowering to see the truth laid bare. We have enough to take him down, Janet declared, her eyes meeting mine with conviction. But we need to be smart about this. We're going to need to go public, expose everything. It's the only way to ensure he can't retaliate or cover his tracks. I swallowed hard, the enormity of our plan sinking in. Are you sure? What if something happens? She placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We'll be prepared. We have the evidence, we have each other. We can't let him continue his reign of deception and abuse. As we moved forward with our plan, the tension escalated. Matthew's threats became more personal, his attempts to undermine me more vicious. But with Janet's guidance and Andrea's unwavering support, I felt a growing sense of resilience. I was no longer the passive wife I had been. I was fighting back, determined to reclaim my life and expose the man I had once loved. The day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed with people eager to see the downfall of Matthew's empire. As I walked in, I felt a surge of nervous energy. Janet stood beside me, her presence a pillar of strength. Matthew sat across the room, his expression unreadable, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of anger and fear. The trial was grueling, a battle of wills that tested every ounce of my strength. Matthew's lawyer, a slick, well-connected attorney named Bruce, tried every trick in the book to discredit me and undermine our case. He painted me as a desperate, bitter woman who had nothing better to do than fight for scraps, portraying Matthew as the victim of a scorned wife. But Janet was relentless. She presented the evidence we had meticulously gathered, each piece a stepping stone towards the truth. She called witnesses who testified to Matthew's unethical practices, his manipulations, and his attempts to sabotage our marriage for his own gain. The courtroom was filled with gasps of shock and murmurs of disbelief as the layers of deceit were peeled away, revealing the true extent of Matthew's corruption. As the trial progressed, I found myself growing stronger, my voice steadier, my resolve unshaken. I realized that this was about more than just a divorce or financial settlement. It was about exposing the darkness that had overshadowed my life, about reclaiming my dignity and my future. In the end, the evidence was irrefutable. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Matthew to pay a substantial settlement and relinquish control of the factory to me. The courtroom erupted in whispers and astonished murmurs as Matthew's empire began to crumble. I felt a sense of triumph and relief wash over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. But the victory was bittersweet. As I left the courthouse, I saw Matthew waiting for me on the steps, his face a mask of anger and desperation. "Lexi," he called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Wait. Please, let's talk. I made a mistake. I was wrong." I stood tall, refusing to let his words pull me back into the pain of our past. "It's too late, Matthew. You ruined everything. I can't forgive you for what you've done." He reached out, his eyes pleading. "I never meant to hurt you. I was lost, and I took the easy way out. Please, give me another chance." I shook my head, tears welling up, but my voice strong. "No, Matthew. I've moved on. I deserve better than the lies and the betrayal. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not with me." As I walked away, I felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a sense of liberation and hope for the future. But little did I know, the battle wasn't over yet. In the weeks that followed, Matthew didn't give up. He used his remaining connections to try and discredit me, spreading rumors and false information to tarnish my reputation. He even attempted to intimidate me, showing up unannounced at my new office, threatening legal action, and making veiled threats about my safety. It became clear that he wasn't ready to let go, that he was willing to go to any lengths to protect his secrets and his pride. One evening, as I was leaving Janet's office after a long day of meetings and strategizing, I noticed a shadowy figure lurking near the entrance. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized it was Matthew, watching me with a sinister intent. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I refused to let fear take hold. I had come too far to let him intimidate me now. As I reached my car, he approached, a menacing look in his eyes. You think you can just walk away, Lexi? You think you can ruin me and get away with it? I stood my ground, meeting his gaze with unwavering determination. I'm not walking away, Matthew. I'm moving forward. And I won't let you drag me down anymore. He took a step closer, his voice low and threatening. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I can make your life a living hell. Before I could respond, a voice rang out, firm and authoritative. That's enough, Matthew. We turned to see Janet standing beside him, her eyes blazing with determination. Leave her alone, she commanded, her presence radiating strength and authority. Matthew hesitated, glancing between us, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by rage. This isn't over, Lexi. You'll see. You'll regret this. With a final glare, he turned and walked away, leaving us standing there in the fading light. Janet looked at me, her expression softening. Don't worry. We'll handle this. In the aftermath of that confrontation, things began to change. With Janet's support and the evidence we had gathered, we were able to take legal action against Matthew's continued harassment. The court issued restraining orders, and his attempts to tarnish my reputation began to falter as more truth came to light about his unethical practices. As the months passed, I started to rebuild my life, focusing on the new opportunities that had opened up for me. Janet helped me establish myself as the new head of the factory, implementing ethical practices and turning the business around. Employees who had once been unsure about the future now felt confident and motivated, grateful for the change in leadership. But even as I moved forward, the scars of betrayal lingered. The trust one had placed in Matthew and in Andrea weighed heavily on me. I struggled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering how I could have been so blind, so trusting. It wasn't until one late night, as I sat alone in my office, that the pieces began to fall into place. I had been going through some old files when I stumbled upon a series of emails between Matthew and Andrea. The messages were filled with plans to sabotage my reputation, to ensure that when the divorce was finalized, I would be left with nothing. My blood ran cold as I read through the correspondence, realizing just how deeply they had betrayed me. Andrea hadn't just been a friend, she had been a willing accomplice in Matthew's scheme to destroy me. Determined to uncover the full extent of their deceit, I brought the evidence to Janet. Together, we launched a new investigation, this time focusing on Andrea's involvement. It wasn't long before we discovered that Andrea had been manipulating me from the start, feeding me false information to keep me distracted while Matthew orchestrated his downfall. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. I received an invitation to a private meeting with Andrea at a local cafe, a place we had frequented during better times. As I sat down, she arrived, her face showing a mix of guilt and defiance. Lexi, she began, her voice trembling, I never wanted it to end like this. I thought I was helping you, protecting you from him. I stared at her, tears welling up in my eyes. Protecting me? You were poisoning me, Andrea. You were in cahoots with Matthew, manipulating everything to ensure I lost everything. She looked away, her shoulders slumping. I was confused. Matthew convinced me that you were the problem, that you were holding him back. I didn't know what else to do. I felt a surge of anger, mixed with a profound sense of betrayal. How could you? We were friends. You were supposed to be there for me, not tear me apart. She looked back at me, her eyes filled with remorse. I'm sorry, Lexi. I never meant for it to go this far. I was lost, and Matthew took advantage of that. The damage had been done. With the evidence Janet and I had gathered, Andrea's role in the scheme was exposed, and she faced legal consequences for her actions. The courtroom drama unfolded swiftly, revealing the depths of their betrayal and manipulation. As I stood there, watching Andrea being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure. The final chapter of my nightmare was coming to an end. I had survived the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the deceit. And now, I was free to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. In the months that followed, I threw myself into the work at the factory, transforming it into a thriving, ethical business. The support from Janet and the community was overwhelming, and I began to heal, piece by piece. The pain of the past was still there, but it was fading, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and resilience. One evening, as I was leaving the factory, I noticed a familiar figure standing near the entrance. It was Joshua, a longtime employee who had always been kind and supportive. He approached me with a warm smile, his eyes filled with concern and admiration. "Lexi," he said softly, "I heard about everything you've been through. I just wanted to let you know that I'm here if you need anything." I felt a flutter in my chest, a warmth spreading through me. "Thank you, Joshua. It means a lot." As we walked together, talking about the future and the changes we were making at the factory, I realized that my life was slowly beginning to take shape once more. The darkness of the past was giving way to a brighter, more hopeful future. But fate had more in store for me. Just as I was starting to find my footing, a new twist emerged, one that would test my newfound strength and resilience in ways I could never have imagined. One afternoon, while reviewing some financial documents, I received a call from Janet. Her voice was urgent, tinged with fear. "Lexi, you need to come to my office right away. It's about Joshua." My heart skipped a beat. Joshua? What could possibly be wrong? I rushed to her office, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived, Janet was pacing nervously, her eyes darting towards the door as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "What's going on?" I asked, concern etched on my face. Janet took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly together. "Joshua's been missing since last night. His car was found abandoned near the river, and there are reports of a struggle. We think something terrible has happened to him." Panic surged through me. Joshua was one of the few people I trusted, the one who had been there for me through thick and thin. The thought of him in danger was unbearable. "What do you mean a struggle? Is he okay?" Janet shook her head, her expression grim. "No, Lexi. There are signs of foul play. We need to call the police and start an investigation immediately." Without wasting a moment, I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the office, my mind racing with fear and confusion. Joshua had always been so reliable, so dependable. I couldn't imagine why anyone would want to hurt him. But as I stood by the riverbank, watching the police canvass the area, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of Joshua. The police investigation revealed disturbing details. Joshua had been receiving threatening messages, warnings to stay away from certain individuals connected to Matthew's business dealings. It became clear that his disappearance was linked to the same web of deceit and corruption that Matthew had spun. Determined to find Joshua and uncover the truth, I threw myself into the investigation, working closely with Janet and the authorities. We followed leads, interviewed witnesses, and delved deeper into Matthew's shady dealings. The closer we got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. Matthew was desperate to keep his secrets hidden, and he wasn't afraid to use violence to protect his empire. One night, as I was poring over documents at home, I received an anonymous tip. A voice on the phone was raspy and hurried. "If you want to find Joshua, meet me at the abandoned warehouse on 5th Street at midnight. Don't bring anyone with you." I felt a surge of fear and hope as I hung up the phone. It could be a trap, but it was the only lead we had. I called Janet immediately, explaining the situation and the potential risk involved. She agreed to come with me, understanding the gravity of the situation. As midnight approached, we drove to the location, the abandoned warehouse standing ominously against the night sky. The air was thick with tension as we approached, our hearts pounding in our chests. We entered cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing the vast, empty space. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. A figure stepped out of the shadows, hands raised in surrender. It was Joshua, bruised and battered but alive. Relief washed over me as I rushed to his side, embracing him tightly. "Joshua, thank God you're okay. What happened?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pain and fear. "Matthew, he found out that we were working together, that we were trying to take him down. He sent people to scare me, to make sure I didn't interfere with his plans." Janet stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the scene. "We need to get you to safety, Joshua. Matthew won't stop until he gets what he wants." As we made our way out of the warehouse, the gravity of the situation hit me. Matthew's corruption was deeper and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. But with Joshua back, by my side, and Janet's unwavering support, I felt a renewed sense of determination. We were in this together, fighting against a formidable enemy who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity, as we worked tirelessly to bring Matthew to justice. The evidence we had gathered, combined with Joshua's testimony, created an airtight case against him. But Matthew was a cunning opponent, always one step ahead, always finding ways to evade capture. One evening, as we were reviewing the final pieces of our case, Janet received a call that sent shockwaves through our team. Matthew had fled the country, using his wealth and connections to disappear into the shadows. The news was a devastating blow, but it only fueled our resolve to ensure he would never harm anyone again. Undeterred, we continued our pursuit, coordinating with international law enforcement to track him down. The journey was long and fraught with challenges, but the support from friends and the community kept me going. Joshua and I grew closer, our shared experiences forging an unbreakable bond between us. Months passed, and finally, a breakthrough came. Matthew was spotted in a remote location, trying to blend into a foreign town. With the combined efforts of Janet and the authorities, we were able to apprehend him, ensuring he would face the consequences of his actions. As I stood in the courtroom, watching Matthew being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of vindication and closure. The man who had once been my everything was now nothing but a shadow of his former self, powerless and exposed for the fraud he truly was. The trial was a cathartic experience, a final chapter in the long story of betrayal and redemption that had defined my life. But even as justice was served, I knew the scars of the past would remain. The pain of betrayal, the fear of the unknown, and the loss of trust in those closest to me were wounds that would take time to heal. Yet, amidst the darkness, there was also a light, a glimmer of hope that promised a brighter future. With Matthew out of the picture, I could finally begin to rebuild my life. Janet and I established a new law firm, dedicated to helping those who had been wronged and fighting for justice. The work was fulfilling, a way to turn my pain into something meaningful, something that could help others avoid the same fate I had endured. Joshua, having survived his ordeal, found solace in the new beginnings we were creating together. His resilience and strength were inspiring, and our friendship blossomed into a deep, unspoken bond. We leaned on each other, finding comfort in the shared experiences that had brought us together. As time went on, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of betrayal and heartbreak. I took up painting, a hobby I had abandoned long ago, finding peace in the strokes of color on canvas. It was a therapeutic escape, a way to process the emotions that still lingered beneath the surface. One afternoon, as I was painting in my studio, Joshua walked in, a warm smile on his face. "You're really talented, Lexi. You've come so far." I looked up, meeting his gaze with a genuine smile. "Thanks, Joshua. It's been a long journey, but I'm finally starting to find myself again." He approached me, his eyes searching mine. "I've always admired your strength, Lexi. You've been through so much, and yet you keep moving forward." I felt a flutter in my chest, a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something that hinted at the possibility of new beginnings. "I couldn't have done it without your support, Joshua. You've been a true friend through all of this." He reached out, gently placing his hand over mine. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Lexi. And I want to be a part of that happiness." In that moment, I realized that life had a way of guiding us through the darkest times, leading us to unexpected places and people who could help us heal. Joshua and I had found each other in the midst of chaos, our bond a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As the months turned into years, our lives continued to intertwine in ways that felt both natural and destined. Janet's law firm flourished, helping countless individuals find justice and peace. Joshua and I grew closer, our relationship evolving into something beautiful and profound. The pain of the past had given way to a future filled with love, hope, and the promise of new beginnings. Looking back, I realized that the ordeal I had endured had shaped me in ways I couldn't have imagined. It had taught me the value of trust, the strength of resilience, and the importance of fighting for what is right. I had learned to rebuild my life from the ground up, to embrace the uncertainty of the future with courage and determination. One sunny afternoon, as Joshua and I sat in the park watching the children play, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow on everything around me. I leaned on Joshua's shoulder, feeling the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I asked softly. He looked down at me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "All the time. But I also know that everything happens for a reason. Our pasts have shaped us, made us who we are today. And I'm grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. "Me too. I used to think that a perfect life was one without challenges, without pain. But now I realize that the struggles we go through are what make us stronger, what give us the depth and resilience to truly appreciate the good times." Joshua smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "Exactly. And I'm here with you, every step of the way." As we sat there, enjoying the simple beauty of the moment, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected twists and turns that had led me to this point. The shattered facade of my perfect life had forced me to confront my deepest fears and insecurities, but it had also paved the way for a new, authentic existence filled with genuine love and unwavering support. Life had tested me in ways I never thought possible, but through it all, I had found my strength, my voice, and the courage to start anew. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on, with the love and support of those who truly mattered. In the end, it wasn't the perfect life I had imagined that brought me happiness. It was the imperfect, messy, and sometimes painful journey of rediscovery that led me to a place of true fulfillment and joy. I had learned that happiness wasn't about avoiding pain or striving for perfection, but about embracing the journey, finding strength in adversity, and cherishing the moments of love and connection that make life truly meaningful. And so, as I continued to build a life filled with love, purpose, and resilience, I carried with me the lessons of the past, the friendships forged in fire, and the unwavering belief that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes, bringing with it the promise of a new day and the hope of a brighter tomorrow.